I was about to go to bed when my phone buzzed. A text from Olivia. "Hey, can you come over?" I frowned. Olivia was out of town. I knew that for a fact because I had dropped her off at the airport 2 days ago. We even joked about how her flight would probably be delayed, but she texted me when she landed. She was with her parents, 3 states away. I typed back, "Aren't you in Chicago?" 3 dots appeared. Then they vanished. A few seconds later, another message came through. "I'm waiting for you inside." I felt my body go cold. I stared at the screen, my fingers tightening around my phone. Maybe she left the key with someone. Maybe she came home early and forgot to tell me. But then why did that message feel wrong? I hesitated before replying. "Who is this?" No answer. The room around me suddenly felt too quiet, like the air itself was listening. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and left. The drive to Olivia's apartment was a blur. The streets were nearly empty, just the occasional car passing by, headlights flashing like warnings. My mind raced through possibilities. A prank? A break-in? Or something worse? When I pulled up to her building, everything looked normal. Too normal. Her window was dark. The parking lot empty. I climbed the stairs, every step echoing in the silence. When I reached her door, I hesitated. Then, I knocked. The sound barely carried down the hallway. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. "Olivia?" Nothing. I tried the handle, expecting it to be locked. It wasn't. The door swung open with a slow, aching creak. The apartment was dark. Stale. Like no one had been inside for days. I stepped in, my pulse hammering against my ribs. "Hello?" Silence. Then, a soft creak from the bedroom. I froze. Something shifted in the darkness beyond the hallway. A floorboard settling. A breath. I reached for the light switch and flicked it on. The living room looked exactly as Olivia had left it. A blanket draped over the couch. A half-full glass of water on the coffee table. A pile of unopened mail near the door. But the air felt wrong. Thick. Heavy. Like I wasn't alone. Another creak. The bedroom door was cracked open just an inch, a sliver of darkness pressing against the dim hallway light. My feet moved before I could think. I reached for the doorknob. Then, my phone buzzed. The sound made me jump. I fumbled to pull it out of my pocket, my fingers numb. A new message. From Olivia. "Don't go inside." My stomach dropped. My mouth went dry. I wasn't breathing. I wasn't moving. But I felt it. A presence. Right behind me. And then, the bedroom door creaked open wider. I nearly dropped my phone. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. The bedroom door creaked open wider, the darkness inside shifting. I braced myself, body locked in place, every instinct screaming at me to run. Then, a familiar shape stepped out. A dog. Olivia's golden retriever, Milo. Relief hit me so fast I almost laughed. My legs went weak, and I leaned against the wall, exhaling sharply. Jesus, Milo. You scared the hell out of me. Milo blinked up at me, tail wagging slightly, but something about him seemed off. His fur was matted in places, like he hadn't been brushed in days. His paws left faint smudges on the hardwood, tracks of something I couldn't quite make out. His eyes, usually warm and full of life, seemed darker, duller. "How'd you get out?" I muttered, kneeling to scratch behind his ears. He felt cold. Too cold. I glanced around the apartment again. Everything looked the same, but that feeling, like something was watching me, hadn't faded. If anything, it had settled deeper, like it had wrapped itself around the walls. Milo whined softly, pressing his nose against my leg. I looked down at him. "Where's your leash?" He just stared at me. The air in the apartment was too still, like the whole place was holding its breath. I swallowed, shaking off the lingering unease. Maybe Olivia's text was just a bad joke. Maybe she had asked someone to check on Milo, and they forgot to lock up. Still, something gnawed at me. I pulled out my phone, rereading the message, "Don't go inside." I hesitated, then typed back, "Very funny. Milo just scared me half to death." 3 dots appeared. Then they vanished. I frowned. Olivia always texted fast. Milo let out a soft whimper. His ears flattened, eyes flicking toward the bedroom. I followed his gaze. The door was still open, revealing nothing but thick, suffocating darkness inside. I hadn't turned the bedroom light off. Had I? Milo took a step back, pressing against my leg. The air suddenly felt colder. I swallowed hard and forced out a laugh. "All right, bud. Let's get you outside." I grabbed his leash from the hook by the door, clipping it onto his collar with shaking hands. The second I opened the front door, Milo bolted, nearly yanking me off my feet. I barely managed to keep hold of the leash as he dragged me down the hallway, his nails clicking frantically against the tile. His whole body trembled like he couldn't get away fast enough. I didn't look back. I locked the apartment behind me and followed Milo down the stairs, that last message from Olivia burning in my mind. If Milo was inside, who opened the bedroom door? Milo didn't stop pulling until we were outside, paws scuffing against the pavement as he dragged me toward the nearest patch of grass. He was shaking, ears flattened, tail tucked so tightly between his legs that it barely moved. I knelt beside him, running my hands over his fur. His breathing was fast, his chest rising and falling in sharp, panicked bursts. "It's okay, buddy," I murmured, though I wasn't sure if I believed it. "You're all right." He didn't look up. He just stared at the apartment building, eyes locked on my window. I followed his gaze. The bedroom light was back on. I sucked in a breath, pulse hammering in my throat. I hadn't touched the switch before leaving. Hadn't even stepped inside the room. Slowly, I reached for my phone. "Olivia. This isn't funny. Is someone in your apartment?" The message delivered instantly. No typing bubble appeared. Milo let out a low whimper, pressing against my leg. I felt his whole body tense as if he was waiting for something. I swallowed hard and looked back up at the window. The light flickered. Once. Then, again. Like someone was standing inside. Moving. My stomach twisted. "Olivia, answer me." 3 dots appeared. My fingers clenched around the phone. Then the reply came. "Who's with you?" The words sent a sharp chill through me. I looked around, my breath fogging in the night air. I was alone. I stared at the message, confusion twisting into something colder. "What are you talking about?" Nothing. No response. The window light flickered once more. Then it went out. The apartment was dark again. Milo let out a low growl. Something about the night felt heavier, like the air had thickened, pressing in around me. I gripped his leash tighter, my free hand curling into a fist to stop the tremor in my fingers. I needed to leave. I needed to turn around and walk away, call Olivia, and tell her to get her locks changed the second she got home. But I couldn't stop staring at that window. Because the longer I looked, the more I was sure someone was still standing there. Watching. Waiting. Milo's growl deepened, a low, rumbling warning that sent another chill up my spine. I wanted to look away from the window, to convince myself I was imagining things, but I couldn't. There was a shape in the darkness. Not a reflection, not a shadow. Something was standing inside Olivia's apartment. It wasn't moving, but I could feel it watching me. I took a step back. Milo let out a sharp bark, yanking against the leash. The noise echoed down the quiet street, but nothing inside the apartment changed. The figure didn't shift. Didn't flinch. It just stood there. My phone buzzed in my hand. "Get out of there." I barely had time to process the message before the light in her apartment flickered back on. And the figure was gone. My breath caught in my throat. My legs felt locked in place, every muscle screaming at me to move. I forced myself to look around, at the street, at the other buildings, at the empty parking lot. Everything else was completely normal. Then my phone buzzed again. "I'm serious. Don't go back inside." I swallowed hard and typed with shaky fingers. "Who is in your apartment?" The reply came instantly. "It's not my apartment." The cold inside my chest spread like ice water through my veins. "Not hers?" I stared at the screen, rereading the words over and over. My pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out everything else. I turned to Milo, who was still tense, ears pinned back. His body trembled under my hand. He was scared. More scared than I'd ever seen him. That should have been enough. That should have sent me running. But instead, I found myself stepping forward, gripping my keys so tightly they bit into my palm. I needed to know. I needed to see. Because if that wasn't Olivia's apartment, then whose was it? And why did it know my name? My feet felt heavy as I stepped toward the apartment door. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to listen to Olivia, to listen to Milo, who was now whining, pulling at his leash in the opposite direction. But I couldn't leave. Not yet. I reached out, my fingers grazing the doorknob. Cold. Too cold. Like it had been sitting in ice. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to turn it. The door swung open with a slow creak. The apartment was exactly as I had left it. Lights on. Couch slightly askew. The kitchen counter still had my half-drunk coffee from earlier. Nothing out of place. But it felt wrong. The air was thick, heavy, pressing down on me like a weight. And it smelled different, stale, like the air hadn't moved in years. My own apartment had never smelled like this. Milo refused to come inside. He planted his paws firmly at the threshold, leash stretched tight, eyes locked on something I couldn't see. I swallowed. "Milo, come on." He whined again, taking a step back. I sighed, unhooking his leash. "Fine. Stay out here." He didn't hesitate. He bolted down the hallway, tail tucked. I stared after him, unease curling in my chest. Milo had never run from anything before. The door shut behind me with a soft click. The sound made my breath catch. I hadn't touched it. I turned slowly, heart hammering. The living room was empty. I forced myself to breathe, to move. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I ignored it. Instead, I walked toward the hallway leading to my bedroom, step by step, my legs stiff, my body resisting. I reached my door. It was slightly open. Had it been like that before? I pushed it fully open. My bed was made. My dresser untouched. The only thing out of place was my closet door. It was open. Just a crack. And something was breathing inside. Shallow, raspy, like the air was being pulled through teeth. I froze. The sound didn't stop. Didn't move. Didn't acknowledge me. I reached for my phone, hands trembling, finally looking at the message Olivia had sent. "Don't go near the closet." I didn't have time to react before the closet door creaked open another inch. And something inside whispered, "I told you not to come back." The whisper curled through the air like smoke, seeping into my skin. My breath hitched, and I stepped back, my body screaming at me to run. Then the closet door slammed open. An icy gust shot through the room, knocking over a lamp and rattling the pictures on the wall. My phone slipped from my fingers, clattering to the floor. I tried to move, but something wrapped around my wrist, invisible, cold, crushing. I choked on a scream. The pressure tightened, yanking me forward with a force that sent me stumbling toward the closet. My knees hit the ground hard. The room blurred around me as the grip spread, clawing up my arm, pressing into my skin like fingers of ice. I struggled, kicking, twisting, but there was nothing there. No hands. No body. Just a crushing, suffocating force that refused to let go. Then, a voice, low, guttural, right against my ear. "You let me in." Pain lanced through my chest, cold and sharp, like something had reached inside me and gripped my ribs. My vision wavered. The walls around me flickered, my bedroom, then darkness, then something else. A rotting hallway. A place that wasn't here. "No, no, no," I thrashed, but the force only pulled harder. My body inched closer to the gaping darkness of the closet. The air inside it wasn't just dark, it was wrong. It had depth, like an open mouth waiting to swallow me whole. I was being dragged in. A guttural snarl ripped through the air. Milo. He shot into the room, teeth bared, his growl deep and primal. He lunged, snapping at whatever had me. The force let go. I gasped as I collapsed backward, my body trembling. The air shifted, the presence recoiling. Milo barked, snapping at the darkness inside the closet. The second his teeth clicked shut, the closet door slammed shut on its own. The room fell silent. My hands were shaking as I crawled backward, gasping for breath. My wrist throbbed. When I looked down, dark bruises were already blooming, shaped like fingerprints. Milo stood between me and the closet, still growling, his fur bristling. I forced myself up, grabbed my phone, and ran. I didn't stop. Not when the lights flickered as I passed. Not when I heard something scraping against the walls. Not even when I felt the icy breath on the back of my neck as I reached the door. I threw it open, nearly tripping over myself as I stumbled into the hallway. Milo followed, and the door slammed shut behind us. I stood there, panting, staring at the door. My apartment. My home. And from inside, muffled but clear, the whisper. This isn't over. My hands were still shaking when I unlocked my phone. I barely registered the sweat slicking my fingers or the way my breath came in sharp, ragged gasps. All I knew was that I had to call for help. I tapped 911. The ringing felt like it stretched for hours before a voice finally clicked in. 911, what's your emergency? I swallowed hard. Please, you have to send someone. There's something in my apartment. It attacked me. It's not human. A pause. Then, in the most patronizing voice I'd ever heard, Ma'am, are you in immediate danger? I looked at my wrist. The bruises were deepening, spreading up my forearm like ink soaking into paper. I licked my lips. Yes. I don't know what it is, but it's real. Please, just send someone. Another pause. Are you alone? I glanced down at Milo. His ears were still pinned back, his tail stiff. He hadn't taken his eyes off the door. No, I said. My dog is with me. Another beat of silence. Then, with the kind of detached boredom that made my stomach drop, the dispatcher said, Ma'am, have you been drinking or taking any substances tonight? My stomach twisted. No. I told you, something attacked me. I have bruises. Have you been experiencing any stress recently? Lack of sleep? Have you had any prior? I hung up. I knew that tone. The same one people use when they think you're crazy. Milo whined, pressing his head into my leg. My breath hitched, and I ran a hand through my hair, trying to keep from shaking apart. They didn't believe me. No one would believe me. Then the pounding on my door sent Milo into a frenzy. His barking was sharp, frantic, but I barely heard it over the ringing in my ears. The laughter from my phone had stopped the moment the first knock hit. Police, a voice called. Open up. I hesitated. For days, I had begged for someone to believe me. But now that they were here, dread coiled in my stomach. I forced myself to my feet and opened the door. 2 officers stood there, a man and a woman, both watching me with careful, unreadable expressions. Behind them, my neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, peered out from her doorway, clutching her robe closed. "Ma'am, we received multiple calls about screaming from this unit," the male officer said. His name tag read Officer Reynolds. His partner, Officer Vega, stood with her arms crossed, scanning the apartment. I swallowed. It wasn't me," I said, but my voice cracked. Vega's gaze landed on my bruised arms. "Are you hurt?" she asked. I shook my head. It's not what you think." Reynolds sighed. "Ma'am, can we step inside?" I hesitated. If they came in, they'd feel it. The way the air in my apartment was wrong. The way the shadows clung to the corners like they were waiting. But I stepped aside. Vega's eyes flickered to my living room. The mess of papers, the empty coffee cups, the scattered printouts on hauntings, possessions, proof that I was deep in something I couldn't escape. "You been sleeping much?" Reynolds asked. I clenched my jaw. Vega's radio crackled. 10 to 96, the dispatcher's voice said. My stomach dropped. 10 to 96, they weren't here to help me. They were here to take me in. I took a step back, but Vega caught my arm. "Ma'am, we're going to have you come with us for a quick evaluation, okay?" "No." I pulled away. "You don't understand. There's something here. It's real." Reynolds pulled out handcuffs. "Let's not make this difficult." Milo growled. The room tilted. Something shifted behind me. I felt the air grow heavy, the unseen presence curling around my neck like fingers ready to squeeze. I tried one last time. "Please. You have to listen to me." Reynolds just sighed. "Yeah. I've heard that one before." The psych ward smelled like antiseptic and old air conditioning. The walls were white. Too white. Like a place built to scrub the mind clean. They took my phone. My camera. My notes. They gave me a gray jumpsuit and a stiff bed in a room with no sharp edges. The window didn't open. The door had a small slot for food trays. I sat on the bed, staring at my bruised arms, at the way the darkness still lingered under my skin like fingerprints. Maybe they were right. Maybe I had lost it. But then, a creak. The air shifted. I turned slowly. The chair in the corner moved an inch. A whisper slid along the walls, curling into my ear. "I told you. I see you." The road had not been paved for years. Only tourists passed through there, mostly young college students who were on a rural getaway to disconnect from the hectic pace of the city. Those who ended up in the hovel I called home were those who dared to stray a little from Donaldsonville, hoping to find some adventure in a wilder nature, and boy, did they find it, poor bastards. At first I felt a little sorry for them. Seeing people in the prime of life with a terrible fate awaiting them certainly turned my stomach. But after years of watching them disregard my warnings and even mock me, Any empathy I might have felt had vanished. It had been 2 days since a group of kids had stopped by. I remember they didn't put on a very good face when I told them that despite the gas station sign, they couldn't fill up. As I used to do with everyone who passed by, I warned them not to go into the woods, because they would find something that wasn't meant to be found. They simply replied, "We don't believe in the superstitions of the country's people." I guess they found the rusty house, or rather, the rusty house found them. Bad luck, no one forced them to come. Like every night, I was sitting on the porch playing blues on my old cigar box guitar and drowning my sorrows in cans of cheap beer. That's when I heard the screams. I looked up and saw her. All of her body covered in blood and running towards me. Dear God. There's no way to find inspiration, I thought as I put my guitar away. The young woman came up to me crying. "Please, you have to help me. The others are dead. God, we have to call the police. I'm afraid the police won't be able to do anything." My words seemed to scare her. She took a step back. "Don't worry, I'm not one of them." Exhausted, she dropped into one of the porch rocking chairs and put her hands on her head. She kept crying for a while. I brought her a glass of water and tried to soothe her as best I could. "I don't understand. What are they? I warned you, young lady. But you guys never listen. Your arrogance doesn't let you see beyond your idyllic modern city life. You are not aware that God abandoned these woods many years ago." She looked at me, bewildered and frightened. "I'm sorry, kiddo, sometimes I lose my mind. This is a quiet lifestyle, but I haven't felt fulfilled lately. Answering your question, I have absolutely no idea what they are. It's something beyond human comprehension. That place you escaped from, the rusty house. Not everyone comes across it. One of you had something that attracted it, and that's why it invited you in. This can't be real. It invited us in? What the fuck does that mean? I've already told you. All I know is that they're part of something bigger, or at least that's what I've always been told, although God only knows what that means." "Who told you that?" "The ones who gave me this job. I used to live and work in the town. I didn't make much money, but at least I was doing something I liked. Every night, Thursday through Sunday, you could see me perform at Old Sam's Saloon. Isaac Lowe's Strings, the one-man band. I was practically only paid with food and free beers, but playing in front of those drunks made me happy. However, it wasn't the optimal job to make ends meet. So when I was offered this job, I had no choice but to take it. At first I was surprised. Work at a gas station that had been closed for years and so close to the area that no one dared to go? I was told not to worry about it. In their own words, my only job was to warn people like yourselves of the dangers that dwelled there. From this point on, it was up to you to decide whether to enter the forest or not. The sacrifice had to be voluntary. And that's how I became that hillbilly in every horror movie. Every day I regret not having followed in the steps of my old friend Hazel and hit the road in search of places to play. The life of a musician on the road, maybe that's what I need to feel alive again. Voluntary sacrifice? You knew this was going to happen. Hey, don't blame me. Didn't you hear what I said? I warned you and you still decided to go. That's why they call it voluntary sacrifice. This is crazy. What you're saying can't be true. She got up abruptly. I need to use your phone. I've already told you. The police can't do anything. They always stay away from this place. Besides, my phone can't make calls. It can only receive them. Look, I know nothing I say will cheer you up. But feel lucky. Not everyone is lucky enough to escape from that place. You can spend the night here and I'll drive you into town tomorrow. Lucky? My friends are dead. My boyfriend is. A deafening scream interrupted her. It wasn't a cry for help. No, 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 no. They're here. Shit. Were you in the basement? I remember that day so vividly. Even now, all these years later. It was early summer and the sun hung high in the sky, casting a heat that clung to everything like a damp cloth, the kind of heat that seems to radiate from the earth itself, turning the air into a thick, almost tangible mass. Alex and I had been stuck in the grind of city life for what felt like forever, rushing from one obligation to the next, our schedules filled to the brim with work and deadlines. We needed to escape, to disconnect. Shenandoah National Park, just a few hours outside the city, seemed like the perfect antidote. A weekend in the woods with the promise of fresh air, towering trees, and some of the most breathtaking views we could imagine. We both knew of Shenandoah's beauty, its sweeping vistas, the way the mountains roll into the distance, the way the sky turns pink and gold as the sun sets over the valleys. We'd heard the stories about the park's tranquility and isolation. How the night skies sparkled with stars you couldn't see in the city, and how you could find peace beneath the canopy of ancient trees. But what we didn't know is how quickly that peace could unravel, how quickly something so beautiful could turn into something terrifying. We arrived in the late afternoon, the sun beginning its slow descent behind the mountains, casting a golden light over everything. It felt like we were entering another world, one where time slowed down, where the hustle and bustle of the city were a distant memory. The air smelled fresh, almost sweet, with the scent of pine and earth. The breeze whispered through the leaves of the trees, and the distant sounds of birds and insects filled the air, creating a gentle soundtrack for the world we had stepped into. We set up camp near the Skyland area, a popular spot that's known for its stunning views and relative accessibility. It wasn't exactly a backwoods adventure, but it was the kind of place where you could escape for a few days without needing to trek for hours to find solitude. The Skyland area was surrounded by dense woods and wild meadows that wound their way through the forest, offering glimpses of breathtaking vistas. It was perfect for what we wanted, an easy escape, a chance to recharge. Little did we know that our peaceful retreat would quickly take a darker turn. After setting up camp, we spent the next few hours soaking in the beauty of the place. We didn't rush, didn't have a schedule to keep. Alex, as usual, was in high spirits. He tossed a stick for his dog, Max, who took off into the underbrush with a burst of energy. Max, with boundless enthusiasm for anything that involved running, jumping, or sniffing around in the woods. We both laughed as we watched him chase the stick, disappearing into the foliage, his tail a blur of motion. Do you think we could live here? Alex asked, casually, plopping down onto a large rock and looking out over the rolling hills that stretched in every direction. His tone was light, but there was an underlying sense of yearning, of wishing for a simpler life, a life without the pressure of deadlines and expectations. I thought about it for a moment, my eyes scanning the horizon. It was tempting, the peace, the isolation, the beauty. It was everything we needed. But then my thoughts drifted to the harsh winters that could freeze this place solid, to the isolation that could feel suffocating if you weren't prepared for it. Maybe, I said finally, but imagine the winters. It's beautiful now, but come January, it's a whole different world. Alex nodded, agreeing. Yeah, true, snowed in for months. Not sure I'm ready for that kind of isolation. We spent the afternoon in a haze of easy conversation, talking about everything and nothing at all. It was the kind of conversation that only happens when you're with an old friend, when the world seems to slow down and the weight of the ordinary falls away. Max, after wearing himself out with a game of fetch, lay down at our feet, his tail thumping lazily against the ground. The fire crackled as we built it higher, sending a warm glow flickering into the gathering darkness. The sounds of the forest around us were soothing, almost hypnotic. The rustling of leaves in the breeze, the distant chirping of crickets, the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. Everything seemed so peaceful, too peaceful. As night fell, the temperature dropped quickly, the air turning cooler as the sun vanished behind the mountains. We huddled closer to the fire, the warmth of the flames a welcome contrast to the chill creeping in from the surrounding woods. The crackling of the fire was the only sound that accompanied our voices as we swapped stories. It felt like the world was a million miles away, like nothing could touch us here in the forest, wrapped in the safety of the firelight. But then something shifted. Max, who had been lying quietly by the fire, suddenly stiffened. His body went rigid, his tail flicking nervously. His ears stood straight up and his eyes locked on something in the darkness beyond the camp. The low growl that rumbled from his throat was like a warning, a deep guttural sound that sent a chill up my spine. It wasn't the playful growl of a dog guarding his territory, but something far more serious. Max, what is it? Alex asked, his voice a little unsteady. As he crouched down beside the dog, he reached out to calm him, but Max wouldn't budge. The growl deepened, a low, continuous rumble that seemed to vibrate in the air. Before we could process what was happening, we heard it, footsteps. They were soft at first, distant, but growing steadily louder, crunching through the underbrush, heavy and deliberate, too heavy for an animal, too purposeful to be a random wanderer. My pulse quickened, and the warmth of the fire suddenly felt far too distant. Hello, I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. The footsteps didn't stop, they were moving closer, and I could feel the hair on the back of my neck standing on end. This wasn't right. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. Alex grabbed the flashlight from his backpack, the beam of light cutting through the darkness, but there was nothing there, just the endless black of the woods, the trees bending in the wind, and the flickering light of the fire. The footsteps stopped. Let's check it out, Alex said, though his voice was tight with unease. We moved cautiously into the darkness, the flashlight beam trembling slightly in Alex's grip as we made our way toward the noise.